This is the depth cutter tool, which you have to use quite extensively to reduce your hexes down to the right depth, either 15mm depth for a normal, say, grass hex, 7.5mm for a river hex, or you need these for making riser hexes too. So the way I would normally recommend that you use this is, say this is your piece of hex you want to reduce down to size. For cutting on the 15mm depth, you want to sort of run the hot wire cutter along the wood, like so. That's cut to the right depth. Now, you notice there that the wire was being dragged along the surface, so it never stays in the same point for very long, and you can use that countless times without it burning into the wood at all. And that's true of all the parts of the toolkit. You're always using a moving wire cutter, except for one part, which is this bit here. So, because the 7.5mm depth is obviously quite thin, when I was designing this toolkit I didn't really feel I could have a long, thin part like that all the way along, which wouldn't be so fragile, it would just snap very easily. So that's why I had it as a step at the end. And the downside to this, which I admit I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but some people have reported problems with this, that because the wire is static whilst you're pushing something through, and it does depend a little bit on your hot wire cutter as to how hot it gets, but it is possible for it to burn slightly into the wood. Like, it's not going to set it on fire or anything, but it may create a groove in the wood, and if you're using this multiple times, that's going to mean you're going to get different thicknesses of. It's not always going to come out 7.5mm, basically, which slightly defeats the object of a depth cutter if it doesn't cut to the consistent depth. So I've got a couple of suggestions for how you can work around that. And credit for this first one goes to one of my Canadian backers, Bram Weeb. I thoroughly recommend his YouTube channel. He shot a few videos when he first got his toolkit, creating an enormous number of hexes. So what he did was get a block of polystyrene, which is the right size to fit into your depth cutter. It doesn't need to be exactly the right size. This is chance really, but big enough that, say, a hex is going to fit on top of it. Actually, slightly bigger than a hex is all that's important, really. So you put it into your wire cutter, into your depth cutter, and place the wire cutter on the 7.5mm step. And now we're going to push it through to cut this one slab as neatly as we can, like this. So notice how his technique is to keep the polystyrene static and slide the wire cutter through. Okay. So there we've got a lovely flat piece. Okay, so I've got a bit of a hole because I put a bolt through that at some point, but it's not making any difference for what you're doing. So now, having done this piece, having cut this, being happy that it's accurate, what you then do is, in future, don't use this again. Instead, anytime you want to cut something down to 7.5mm, you put this into your depth cutter first, then place the bit you want on top. You want to cut down to 7.5mm, and then, sorry, using the wrong technique there. Like this. So you see, what I did there was I'm sliding it along the wood, so it's not going to stay static in the same place. And now you've got another piece which is also 7.5mm. And you can see, well, I can feel these are perfectly, that's identical depth. That's a great workaround, I think. Another, in fact, I'd probably recommend that as the way to do it. It's probably the best. Another suggestion, which you can do, if you have a hot wire cutter like this with adjustable screws in it, it means that you don't have to set it right at the end like this. You know, you can move it at any point. You can cut diagonals. That's the idea. So what you can do is place it over the step on your wire cutter, on your depth cutter. Lower it down so it's just touching on each side. And this, having done this a few times, this does take a bit of playing with it to get it to a point where you're happy with it. So you want to be just barely touching. Okay. Have a little look to make sure it looks even. And now, if you want to cut something down to depth, just hold this. Make sure you keep it vertical, because if you turn it to the side at all, that's going to change the distance between the table and the wire. If you keep it vertical, sorry, the camera cut out of me there, so just to show you that again, you push your piece through, and that reduces it to the right depth. So lining it up against here, that's the same thickness. So that's two methods you can use to avoid having to have your wire fixed on the same point, which might cause a burn, a groove getting burnt into it. Use whichever method you prefer. I think having done both, Brown's method probably wins for me. I think that gives the easiest method with the best results.